Do you need help with marketing, new clients, or online reviews? Massage Book is your solution, streamlining all the challenging aspects of your massage therapy practice. This powerful software simplifies scheduling, payments, and marketing, allowing you to focus on what you do best, helping clients live better. Plus, sign up now with code ABMP50 and get $50 off after your free 30-day trial. Visit massagebook.com, create an account, and transform your practice today. That's Massage Book with code ABMP50 for $50 off. Don't wait. Give it a shot today. Anatomy Trains will be holding our flagship Anatomy Trains Structural Integration ATSI training in beautiful Vancouver starting September 16th, 2024. Progressively build your anatomical knowledge, hands-on manual therapy techniques, and most importantly, seeing and understanding postural patterns and developing strategies tailored to individual needs. We warmly invite you to apply today and bring your bodywork career to the next level. Visit anatomytrains.com for more.
Years ago, George R.R. Martin wrote the book A Song of Ice and Fire, the first of the Game of Thrones anthology. And way before it became a hit TV series, the first books enjoyed their own fame, skyrocketing to the top of everyone's reading list, including mine. I am a sucker for what's trending, so I dove in. And 42 pages later, I put it down. I could not get through it. You know why? I simply could not keep the characters' names straight in my head. I had zero associations with them. I would see the names written on the page and go in my head. The story seemed cool, but then I would get to a name and couldn't remember what was going on for that person the last time they were involved or who they were related to, much less what house they were in. I had never known a Tyrion or a Daenerys before, so I got lost, and I gave up. Learning anatomy can be like reading Game of Thrones. So many of us pick up our first textbooks and, about 42 pages in, put it down and give up. But that's not because anatomy isn't easy to understand. It's because learning anything can be difficult. Let me rephrase that. Learning something that sounds unfamiliar and is not embedded in some part of our brain that we already have a strong grasp of is difficult. It can be, as some say, like learning a foreign language. Because it is. I mean, there is a lot of Latin there, some Greek, and some names of scientists who discovered things, which can be even worse. And also, on top of all of that, anatomy can be difficult to grasp because we, humans, in our efforts to be able to identify, discuss, and teach about the parts that make up our whole, have created a whole lot of categories that help us to understand them. This is awesome, but this is also problematic. Let me explain why. Our brains need categories. As babies, we see and experience our immediate surroundings and begin to equate them with the most simple categories that exist, good and bad. When we are hungry, that's bad. When we eat, that's good. When we have an itch or a boo-boo, bad. When we are warm and comforted, good. Yelling, bad. Smiling, good. And so on. Then the categories get more complex. That is a dog. This is a school. This is a holiday. That is frustration. And so we learn how to place these things and ideas in compartments in our brains so the next time they enter the picture, we can access it, not spend too much time trying to understand it again, and move on. Compartments and groupings and categories, they are a good thing. But categories can also be obstacles. Like, at what point does a stream become a river? Or where does blue become teal? Or is Jon Snow a Stark or a Targaryen? Or, more importantly, when does the periosteum become the paramecium? We have names for as many in-betweens as possible, but there's also that fraction or that moment that it's not quite clear or maybe could be its own category. In my opinion, this is where artists live, but that's a different topic. Kind of. In creating definitions, In so much of science, we take these incredible aspects of life and attempt to squeeze them into a box. It does help us to see them better, but it also limits what they are. Hence the conundrum. Intro to anatomy classes usually go something like this. First, we take a look at the big picture, how the tiniest bits make up the big whole. We look at a cell, maybe make a cell out of Jell-O or some other fun craft. Then we look at how combining cells together forms tissues. Then tissues come together to form organs, then organ systems, then the whole being. Love it. Totally right. But then we pick one of those parts and focus in on it. Maybe a system or a tissue. And we learn very quickly that they are divided even more into smaller parts. Those then have subcategories and divisions and are named names that are Game of Thrones worthy. And understanding how they all interact gets kind of lost. Take the erector spinae group, for example. It's a big group of spinal muscles that has been divided into 3 subgroups: the iliocostalis, the longissimus, and the spinalis. Each of those then has their own subdivision. The iliocostalis, the most lateral of the 3 named for its connections to the ilium, or the hip, and to the costals, or the ribs, has 3 more subdivisions. The iliocostalis lumborum, or the portion located in the lumbar region, the iliocostalis thoracis, the portion living in the thoracic area, and the iliocostalis collis, or cervicis, or, as you guessed it, the fibers of this muscle that are located in the neck. But wait, there's more. There's the categories of how the iliocostalis works. It, or they, are all considered postural muscles, which differ from phasic muscles, and they are all antagonists, meaning acting in opposition, to the abdominals, but also to each other. They are typically classified as slow twitch fibers, not fast twitch fibers, but most muscles have a combination of slow and fast twitch fibers, and they contract eccentrically into trunk flexion as opposed to concentrically into their prime movement of trunk extension, but they are also synergists to lateral flexion. And this is just one aspect of one muscle, of one tissue, of the whole being. Before I go really sideways here, please know that learning these names and these parts and these categories is important. Not only does it save us from having circular conversations in an attempt to articulate that up means towards the head and not necessarily towards the ceiling, or that cortex will refer to the surface, whether it be in the brain or the kidneys or where have you, but it also elevates how we as massage therapists stand in the medical community. Being able to speak anatomy is an invaluable skill. It's like being able to speak Game of Thrones at a party of superfans. What we lose sight of, though, when we get this detailed, is the big picture. Back before I tried to read Game of Thrones, I had little offspring in the house, and my kids, as they do, introduced me to lots of colorful, creative, and very cool content that expanded my adult linear thoughts. One of these is the world of Studio Ghibli. While Arya Stark was avenging the Red Wedding, I fell in love with Ponyo and Totoro. If you haven't seen a Studio Ghibli movie, stop listening to this and run to your nearest streaming service and watch all of them. Or wait, give me a minute to explain my point and then go. Studio Ghibli is a Japanese animation film house that produces beautiful hand-drawn films that do so much more than tell a story. Their films reach all levels of the human experience, and their characters, often quite literally, expand beyond the skin. I can't describe it well enough to do it justice, but my point is, our anatomy is like a Studio Ghibli film. One part has so much complexity and depth to it in and of itself, but it can, and often does, morph into something new that is connected and similar, but also somehow very different. The storytellers and animators at Studio Ghibli live in that in-between space and infuse the ordinary with magical qualities. A heron will transform into an old man, a fish becomes a little girl, and the dust and soot settled in an old house become sprites who spy on those who enter. Often, those characters trigger a sense of fear at first glance. Change can be scary, after all. But then they reveal themselves to be vulnerable, relatable, and not necessarily assigned to a category of good or evil. And somehow, it all makes sense. In our incredible bodies, those in-between spaces are literally everywhere. The aortic root branches off of the heart and becomes an artery. It then winds away to become an arterial, which becomes a capillary, and then continues into and through the intracellular fluid, communicates with tissues and organs, weaves with the lymphatics, and then more capillaries transitioning to become a venule and then a vein, circulating ultimately back to the heart. Our nervous system seems to have a tethered yet romantic relationship with the endocrine system that quite literally bounces and weaves its way everywhere to spark and enhance or light up our every perception. And our muscles, well, this is worth considering from a bodyworker's point of view. Our muscles, like Lord Iliocostalis of House Erector Spinae, are so much more than an origin, an insertion, and an action. They are complex and layered creatures who do not act alone. One part of one muscle group may have specific assignments, but the body as a whole is an intermingling, constantly morphing, never-ending chatter of evolution. The iliocostalis thoracis is woven into its surroundings. The vastus lateralis is embedded in a dynamic blanket. The anterior scalene is one instrument in a grand concert. Our cells, tissues, organs, and systems do not, never have, and never will act alone. The names and categories that we learn in our classes and textbooks don't do it any justice. It is a necessary rite of passage, but what they are called and what houses they live in take our focus away from the transitions and the transformations that ultimately complete the big picture. The in-between animated aspects complete the whole. One more thing. The quality of food in the world of Studio Ghibli is also something of note. There is a celebration around it and a seemingly enchanted quality to it. Clearly, food is awesome. We love food. But what it does when it enters our system is nothing less than entirely magical. Sure, there are explanations about the chemical processes and nutritional breakdowns, but how food makes us feel has layers to it that extend far beyond proteins, lipids, and fats. More categories. Trying to keep track of what is quote-unquote healthy can be as frustrating as trying to understand anatomy. Don't overcomplicate it. Food is what fuels our every particle and all the spaces in between. We have learned so much about human anatomy. What all of these parts are and how they work together gives us immense amounts of information that we use in our practice. Just try to remember this. Memorizing all of these terms doesn't take away from some of the more intuitive stuff you may already know. It just helps you to know it and talk about it with more accuracy. Read, watch, study, learn. Take a break from trying to understand the 7 kingdoms of Westeros when it gets overwhelming, and treat yourself to a Studio Ghibli pick. Toggle between the two and take it all in, but don't ever stop. There's way too much awesomeness in who we are. This is my last pod of the year. I'll be back with more in 2025. But as one year moves into the next, enjoy the transition, celebrate the transformation, and lean into the new. I love you guys and wish you all a happy and healthy holiday season.